Grandpa, Mom and Dad are going to take all your money after the party today, my 8-year-old granddaughter whispered into my ear. It was a normal Saturday morning in San Diego, the kind of day that was supposed to be filled with the promise of sunshine and a granddaughter's birthday party. Instead, Lily's innocent words shattered the fragile peace I'd built for myself, like a glass vase falling on a tiled floor. I was Daniel Dan Miller, a man who had spent his life building things, from houses to relationships, and in a single moment, a foundation I thought was solid crumbled beneath me. I, a trusting grandfather who had always supported them, left early, hiding my shock behind a mask of fatigue. I couldn't face the party, couldn't sit there and watch my son and daughter-in-law, knowing what they were planning. But what I did next, a cunning plan for revenge for their betrayal, shocked everyone. I would beat them at their own game, and they would never forget it. It had all started earlier that morning. Mark's voice cracked through the phone, cutting through the serene Saturday quiet like a rusty blade. It was a 7 a.m. call, completely out of character for him. "I know what you're thinking, Dad, but hear me out," he started, a nervous tremor in his voice that I hadn't heard since his teenage years. My apartment in La Jolla held the particular stillness that comes when you've lived alone long enough to stop expecting company. I settled back into my kitchen chair, watching the steam rise from my coffee mug, as the morning light painted golden squares across the expensive granite countertops that my late wife, Diane, and I had picked out together. "Well, Sarah really wants. We both think you should definitely come to Lily's birthday party today." His words tumbled out too fast, a rehearsed script that he had forgotten the rhythm to. A cold knot of dread tightened in my chest. Since when did my own son need to convince me to see my granddaughter? "Mark, when have I ever missed one of Lily's birthdays?" I asked, my voice steady despite the unease I felt. No, that's not what I meant. It's just that Sarah's been planning this for weeks, and she specifically asked me to call and make sure you're coming." The words were an obvious fabrication. Sarah, the same woman who usually treated my presence like a necessary inconvenience, was suddenly insisting on my attendance? "That's thoughtful of her," I replied, stirring my coffee slowly. "Yeah, she's really excited about it. The party starts at 2, but maybe you could come a little early. We wanted to talk about some family stuff." Family stuff. The spoon clinked against the mug as I set it down. In the 3 years since Diane passed, family stuff had never required special conversations. "What kind of family stuff?" I asked, my internal alarm bells ringing. "Oh, just planning things, future things. Sarah has some ideas about how we can all be more involved with each other." I walked to the window, the phone pressed to my ear, watching my neighbor Frank water his rose garden. Sarah with ideas about family involvement, the same Sarah who had spent last Christmas dinner checking her phone every 5 minutes. My businessman's instincts, honed over 40 years in construction, were screaming. I'd learned to read people across conference tables, and I knew when someone was selling something they didn't believe in themselves. "Great. So, you'll be there early, maybe around 1:30? "Of course, I'll be there early. I wouldn't miss Lily's day for anything." My focus shifted to a picture on my refrigerator, a crooked house with stick figures labeled Grandpa, Daddy, Mommy, and me. That little girl was the brightest spot in my world. "Perfect. And Dad," Mark's voice dropped lower, carrying a guilty undertone, "just keep an open mind about what we want to discuss, okay? It's all about making sure everyone's taken care of." The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone, my mind replaying that last phrase. Making sure everyone's taken care of. In my experience, when people started talking like that, they usually meant taking care of themselves first. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It was a feeling I knew well, the feeling you get when you realize the foundation isn't as strong as it looks. And in this case, the foundation was my own family. I tried to shake off the unease that had settled in my stomach after Mark's phone call. I looked in my bedroom closet, staring at the shirts Diane would never see me wear again. The blue Oxford brought back memories of her funeral, but also a chilling thought. Mary had whispered about the house having all this space, while we were still burying my wife. Even back then, something in her tone had felt calculating, a subtle hint of greed. My wallet, a worn leather billfold, sat heavy in my back pocket. In the 3 years since Diane passed, I'd given Mark and Sarah over $70,000 for everything from mortgage payments to car loans to Lily's private school tuition. Diane would have called it excessive, but she would also have agreed that Lily deserved better than her parents could provide on their own. Walking to the kitchen for my keys, I passed the refrigerator where Lily's latest drawing hung beside my shopping list. She'd drawn our last fishing trip together, two stick figures smiling by a blue crayon lake. "Best day ever, Grandpa," was written in purple marker along the bottom. It was then that a casual conversation I'd had with my neighbor Frank came back to me with fresh clarity. We were chatting about our week, and Frank mentioned seeing Mark and Sarah downtown on Tuesday morning, coming out of the Union Bank with a stack of papers. Frank, a good-natured man who always saw the best in people, had simply chuckled, saying they probably were just refinancing something, the way young people do these days. But in the light of Mark's nervous call, the timing felt oddly coincidental. I grabbed my car keys from the counter, remembering Diane's last coherent words to me. "Promise me you'll always take care of Lily, but watch Mark carefully. He's weak, and weak people make dangerous choices when someone strong is whispering in their ear." At the time, I'd thought she was referring to his friends or get-rich-quick schemes. Now, I wondered if she had seen something in Sarah that I had missed, the way Sarah always started conversations about money by mentioning Lily's needs, making me feel selfish for even questioning the expenses. After wrapping Lily's gifts and grabbing a quick lunch, I arrived at Mark's house precisely at 2 o'clock. The front door opened before I could even ring the bell. "Dan! What a lovely surprise!" Sarah practically sang my name, her arms spreading wide for a hug. Her enthusiasm felt foreign. She usually offered a quick, polite smile before disappearing into kitchen duties. Today, she touched my arm twice while speaking, her eyes bright with a manic energy I'd never seen directed at me before. The house was decorated far more elaborately than for previous birthday parties, with colorful streamers and balloon clusters in every corner. "Grandpa!" Lily ran toward me, her genuine smile cutting through the artificial atmosphere like a ray of sunlight. She hugged me tightly, and for a moment the world felt normal again. I gave her the gift bag containing a detailed Lego architecture set of the Statue of Liberty, a gift for her curious, growing mind. Her eyes widened at the picture on the box, but a flicker of sadness passed across her face when she looked up to thank me. It was a fleeting shadow that vanished as soon as Sarah approached, cooing, "Isn't Grandpa generous, honey? Say thank you properly." The rest of the afternoon was a strange performance. Every smile felt calculated, every laugh too loud. I watched Mark and Sarah exchange quick glances, subtle nods, and perfectly timed interruptions when conversations approached certain topics. They were managing me, I realized, ensuring I stayed comfortable, engaged, and most importantly, present for whatever they had planned after the guests departed. As the party wound down, Mark caught my attention. "Dad, stick around after everyone leaves, okay? Sarah and I have been looking forward to that family chat we mentioned." The artificial cheerfulness was weighing on me now, like the humidity before a thunderstorm. I excused myself, heading toward the hallway where a gallery of family photos lined the walls. Lily, seeing me, followed me, her small footsteps quiet behind me. "Grandpa?" she whispered. The birthday girl, who should have been glowing with excitement, looked instead like she carried the weight of the world on her 8-year-old shoulders. "They're planning to take your money tonight," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Mom said you have too much money for an old man living alone, and Dad seemed scared, but she said the papers from the bank would make everything legal." The conversation Frank had mentioned suddenly made terrible, terrifying sense. My business instincts, dormant for years, roared back to life with crystalline clarity. I pulled her into a fierce hug, feeling her small body tremble against mine. "Listen to me carefully," I whispered into her hair. "You did the right thing telling me, but we need to keep this our secret for now. Can you do that? I'm going to handle everything." We returned to the party hand in hand, but everything had changed in those few whispered minutes. The son I had raised and the daughter-in-law I had supported were now seen through a lens of cold, calculated betrayal. I looked at Mark and Sarah across the room. They were so busy playing the role of the perfect hosts, so proud of their carefully orchestrated charade, that they didn't even notice the change in me. The false enthusiasm that had puzzled me earlier now made perfect sense. They were trying to get me to a vulnerable place, a place where I would trust them blindly. But the game had changed. The weary grandfather persona I had to adopt was not a weakness. It was a carefully chosen piece in a much larger chess match. As the afternoon shadows lengthened and guests began to collect their belongings, I announced my intention to leave early. I think I should head home. This headache isn't improving, I said, maintaining the weary grandfather persona. The effect was immediate. Mark and Sarah exchanged a look of genuine alarm. Dad, wait! Mark moved to block my path to the door. We really wanted to talk about those important family matters we mentioned. You promised to stay after everyone left. Perhaps another time, I replied gently. I really need to rest. But Sarah stepped closer, her voice taking on an urgent undertone. Norman, we have something special planned for tonight. Something we've been preparing for weeks. The bank visit my neighbor, Frank, had mentioned, the legal documents, the entire plan that required my presence and cooperation. I could see their carefully orchestrated timeline beginning to collapse. I'm sure it can wait until tomorrow, I replied. Family isn't going anywhere. Mark's face flushed with desperation. Actually, Dad, there are some time-sensitive issues we need to discuss. Financial matters that can't wait. Financial matters that can't wait. I filed away the comment, another piece of intelligence gathered. Tomorrow, son, I promise. I turned toward Lily, who had been watching our exchange with worried eyes. Kneeling, I pulled her into what might be our last innocent embrace before everything changed. Thank you for the most wonderful birthday party, sweetheart. She hugged me tightly. I love you so much, she whispered. I love you too, more than you'll ever know. As I stood, I felt Mark's hand on my shoulder, heavier than necessary, almost restraining. I looked into my son's eyes and saw not the boy I'd raised, but a desperate man whose greed had overwhelmed whatever love remained. Another time, Mark. I need to go home now. Walking to my car while they watched from the doorway, I felt the weight of the performance finally lifting. Alone in my Mercedes, I sat for a moment, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. My family had planned to rob me, to steal everything I had built. Starting the engine, I drove away from the house, the quiet of my car a sanctuary from their frustrated tension. Back inside my home in La Jolla, the silence felt different. It was no longer peaceful, but pregnant with purpose. I walked directly to my home office, the room where I'd built my construction business from a single truck and stubborn determination. Behind a portrait of Diane, a wall safe held 40 years of important documents. I spun the combination, 18 to 1959, Diane's birthday, my fingers guided by muscle memory. The documents told a story I had been too trusting to read properly. Bank statements revealing a pattern of financial requests that had escalated over 3 years. Investment portfolios worth far more than Mark or Sarah suspected. And most importantly, records of every payment I'd made to support their lifestyle, 247 individual transactions, meticulously documented. My phone sat silent on the desk. Mark and Sarah would be scrambling, trying to figure out how to proceed. Opening my business card file, I found Robert Harrison's personal number. Robert, the vice president of Union Bank, would understand exactly what legal documents obtained under false pretenses meant. Next, I reviewed my will and trust documents, which left everything to Mark with provisions for Lily's education. These documents would need immediate revision. Jennifer Collins, the notary who had handled most of my legal paperwork over the years, would be the next call. Independent, discreet, and unconnected to any bank where Mark and Sarah might have allies. This wasn't about money. This was about justice for an 8-year-old girl whose parents were willing to traumatize her with adult secrets. This was about ensuring that betrayal came with consequences. Diane's voice echoed from our last conversation. Watch Mark carefully. Now, I understood. Sarah had been whispering in his ear for years, and Mark had chosen greed over family loyalty at every turn. My phone rang suddenly, jarring me from planning. Mark's name appeared on the caller ID. I let it ring. Sunday morning brought a clarity that a restless night had failed to provide. After finally falling asleep near dawn, I woke with my businessman's instincts fully engaged and a specific plan in mind. Over coffee in my home office, I opened my business contact file to Robert Harrison's personal number. 9 o'clock seemed appropriate for calling an old friend about financial matters. "Robert, sorry to bother you on a Sunday morning," I began when he answered. "I've been reviewing my investment portfolio and wanted to get your thoughts on some consolidation ideas." "Dan, always good to hear from you." His voice carried genuine warmth. "What's on your mind?" "I'm considering simplifying my accounts, maybe centralizing everything for easier management. What are current banking policies on financial assistance programs?" "Well, there are several options depending on your needs. Are you thinking about automated services or more comprehensive management assistance?" "Perfect," I thought. "Actually, I've been wondering about power of attorney arrangements, conservatorship options. Have any clients been dealing with those recently?" A pause stretched across the line. I could almost hear him considering confidentiality boundaries. "Funny you should ask. Just last week, I had a couple inquiring about guardianship procedures for an elderly family member." My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. "Oh, a complex process, I imagine." Actually, they seemed quite prepared. Had done considerable research on conservatorship requirements, documentation timelines. Very thorough people. Mark and Sarah had researched exactly how to steal my independence with legal precision. That's thoughtful of them to help their family. They were asking specific questions about mental competency evaluations, financial management documentation, and timelines for court approval. They understood the terminology better than most attorneys I've worked with. My hands clenched around the phone. They'd planned to have me declared incompetent and seize control of everything I'd spent 40 years building. The scope of their betrayal kept expanding beyond what I'd imagined possible. "Did they seem confident about their situation?" I asked carefully. "Absolutely. They mentioned having documentation ready, medical opinions prepared. Said they expected the process to move quickly once initiated." Robert chuckled. "Most families aren't nearly so organized when dealing with elderly care transitions." Elderly care transitions. The euphemism made my hands clench around the phone. They'd researched how to institutionalize me while stealing my wealth, and they'd done it with systematic, professional thoroughness. Sounds like they really cared about their family members' welfare. That's what struck me most, how much preparation they'd put into ensuring everything would be legally proper and swift. They asked about expedited processes, emergency conservatorship procedures. Hearing my own situation described in clinical banking terms felt surreal. "Well, I appreciate the information, Robert. It gives me a better sense of available options." "Anytime, Dan. Though honestly, you seem sharper than men half your age. Can't imagine you needing that kind of assistance for decades yet." "Let's hope you're right. Thanks for taking my call on Sunday." After hanging up, I sat staring at my notes from the conversation. Mental competency evaluations, documentation ready, medical opinions prepared, emergency procedures. Mark and Sarah hadn't just planned to rob me. They'd engineered a complete legal framework to justify stealing my life. The phone rang suddenly. Mark's name appeared on the caller ID again. This time I answered. "Hello," I answered with deliberate weariness. "Dad, thank goodness. I was worried sick about you leaving early yesterday." His voice carried what sounded like genuine concern, but I now recognized the calculation beneath it. "Are you feeling all right?" "Oh, Mark." I let my voice trail off slightly, as if gathering my thoughts had become difficult. "I've been having these terrible headaches. Hard to concentrate on anything." "That doesn't sound good. Maybe we should have you checked by a doctor. Sarah and I could drive you to the clinic this afternoon." "Perfect." They were accelerating their timeline exactly as I'd hoped after disrupting their original plan. "That's very thoughtful of you both. I've been feeling so confused lately." "Don't worry, Dad. We'll take care of everything. We'll be over in about an hour. Okay?" After hanging up, I spent 30 minutes preparing for the performance of my life. I mussed my hair slightly, put on an old cardigan that made me look frailer, and practiced the slower, more hesitant movements of genuine elderly confusion. When their car pulled into my driveway, I was ready. "Dan, we brought some papers that might help with your situation," Sarah announced as they settled into my living room. She'd brought a leather portfolio, the kind lawyers used for important documents. "Papers?" I blinked at her with what I hoped appeared to be genuine bewilderment. "What kind of papers?" Mark leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Dad, we've been researching ways to help you manage things better. Your finances, medical decisions, that sort of thing." "Manage?" I rubbed my temples as if the conversation was causing physical pain. Everything seems so complicated these days. Sarah opened the portfolio with practiced efficiency. These documents would give us power of attorney to help with your banking, bills, medical appointments. Think of it as having a backup system. The forms looked professionally prepared with highlighted sections for my signature. It's all so overwhelming, I murmured. I used to understand these things better. That's exactly why we need to do this now, Sarah pressed gently, before things get more confusing for you. Mark shifted uncomfortably. Dad, are you sure you're okay? You seem really different today. I looked at him with confused gratitude. Different? I don't feel different. Just tired all the time. These headaches make it hard to think clearly. Mark and Sarah exchanged a glance, the same coordinated communication I'd noticed at the party. I now understood its purpose. They were evaluating whether I was impaired enough to sign documents without fully understanding their implications. Dan, these papers would just make it easier for us to help you, Sarah continued. You wouldn't have to worry about managing everything alone. I suppose that would be nice, I said slowly, picking up one of the documents with trembling hands. But this is such a big decision. My head is pounding, trying to think it through. Of course, it's a big decision, Mark said quickly. Take your time. Sarah's patience looked more strained, though. Don't you think it would be easier with family help? You trust us, don't you? Of course, I trust you. You're my family. I set the papers down carefully. But could I maybe sleep on it? Decide tomorrow when I'm thinking clearer? These headaches make everything so fuzzy. Mark and Sarah looked at each other again, and I could see Sarah's frustration barely contained beneath her caring facade. Sure, Dad. We'll come by tomorrow morning, and you can sign them then. After they left, I allowed myself to slump in my chair, dropping the performance for the first time in hours. The documents they'd left behind told the complete story. Power of attorney forms that would give them control over my finances, medical decisions, and living arrangements. Everything Robert had warned me about, laid out in legal language designed to steal my life. 3 hours later, I sat in my home office, reviewing my notes from Mark and Sarah's visit, feeling like a general planning a campaign. The power of attorney documents they'd left behind lay spread across my desk, professional forms that would have given them complete control over my finances, medical decisions, and living arrangements. Every signature line was highlighted in yellow, every witness requirement meticulously marked. They had done their homework, but they'd forgotten I had spent 40 years doing mine. Jennifer Collins, my longtime notary, answered on the second ring. Dan, good evening. What can I do for you? She asked. Jen, I need notary services tomorrow morning for some family financial documents. Could you come to my house around 10? Of course. What type of documents? Power of attorney forms. It might be a sensitive family matter, so I'd appreciate your professional discretion. Oof. You know you can count on that. I'll bring my seal and journal. Jennifer had notarized dozens of contracts for my construction business over the years. She would recognize irregular pressure tactics or coercion immediately. It was part of her professional training. Next, I called Robert Harrison. Robert, could you stop by tomorrow morning around 10? I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I'd like to review my portfolio in detail. Certainly, Dan. After what we discussed about financial management assistance, I think a thorough review would be wise. Excellent. It might be educational. Robert chuckled. I'll bring the necessary paperwork. See you at 10. Robert would witness whatever Mark and Sarah planned to do, and as a bank vice president, he'd understand exactly what he was seeing. His presence would add legal weight to any documentation of their behavior. My final call was to Mark. I let my voice carry the tremulous uncertainty I'd performed earlier. Mark, I've been thinking about those papers you brought. You were right. I do need help managing things. Dad, that's wonderful. Sarah will be so relieved. We can come over first thing tomorrow morning. I've arranged for a notary to make everything proper and legal. 10 o'clock sharp. Perfect. And Dad, thank you for trusting us with this. Trust. The word sat bitter in my mouth, but I managed to sound grateful. You're my family. Of course I trust you. After hanging up, I looked out the window at Diane's rose garden, which needed attention. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and wrote down the sequence of events I expected tomorrow. 9:45 a.m. Jennifer arrives. 10 a.m. Robert arrives. 10:05 a.m. Mark and Sarah arrive, expecting easy document signing. 10:15 a.m. Truth emerges. The irony was beautiful. They'd researched how to steal my independence through legal procedures, but they'd forgotten that legal procedures require proper witnesses and documentation. Tomorrow, those same requirements would expose their betrayal. They had no idea they were walking into a trap set by the same business mind that had built what they were trying to steal. Monday morning arrived, gray and cold. I had slept little, but when Jennifer arrived at 9:45, I felt completely prepared. Robert knocked precisely at 10. "Morning, Dan. Ready for that portfolio review?" he asked. "More ready than you know," I replied. A moment later, Mark and Sarah entered with confident smiles and their leather document case. They paused when they saw Jennifer and Robert, but Sarah recovered quickly. "How thoughtful of you to arrange professional assistance," she said smoothly. "This will make everything so much more official." Indeed it will," I replied, my voice carrying none of yesterday's confused frailty. "Please, everyone, take a seat." Mark settled into the chair across from my desk. "Dad, you sound much better today. More like your old self." "Exactly like my old self," I said, meeting his eyes directly. "Sharp, observant, capable, which is why I need to tell you something before we sign any documents." Sarah's pen stopped moving across her checklist. "Dan, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong with me, Sarah, but I'm completely aware of your plan." The silence stretched like a taut wire. Mark's smile faltered. "Dad, what plan? We're here to help you." "I know about your visit to Robert's bank last Tuesday. I know about the guardianship procedures you researched. I know about the mental competency evaluations you plan to arrange." Mark's face drained of color. Sarah attempted damage control. "Dan, you're confused. We visited the bank about our own financial planning." I turned to Robert. "Would you mind sharing what they discussed?" Robert cleared his throat professionally. "They asked detailed questions about conservatorship procedures, documentation requirements for declaring someone mentally incompetent, and expedited court processes for emergency financial management." Jennifer, suddenly alert, looked at me. "Mr. Miller, are you saying these power of attorney documents were prepared under false pretenses?" "I'm saying they planned to have me declared incompetent so they could steal everything I've worked 40 years to build." Mark's voice came out strangled. "Dad, we were worried about you. Yesterday you seemed so confused. Yesterday I was performing. Today you're seeing who I really am." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the documentation I'd prepared. 247 transactions over 3 years. $70,000 in support payments. Every mortgage payment, every car repair, every private school tuition bill, all documented. "Those were legitimate family expenses," Sarah insisted. "They were conditioning payments, training me to say yes to increasingly larger amounts until I'd agreed to sign away my independence." I looked directly at her. "You researched exactly how to have me institutionalized while you divided my assets." Jennifer set down her pen. "This is highly irregular. I need to understand the full situation before notarizing anything." "The full situation," I continued, "is that my son and daughter-in-law spent weeks researching legal procedures to steal my money, consulted with lawyers about guardianship processes, and planned to have me declared mentally incompetent based on fabricated evidence of confusion." Mark's hands shook. "We just thought you might need help managing things." "Help managing a net worth of $2.3 million plus 3 rental properties? Help that required consulting attorneys about emergency conservatorship procedures?" Sarah stood abruptly. "You're twisting everything. We love you." "Love doesn't involve conspiracy, Sarah. Love doesn't involve researching how to steal someone's independence while they're still healthy and competent." Robert spoke quietly. "Dan, the questions they asked were very specific. They knew legal terminology that most families never encounter unless they're planning something significant." Jennifer nodded grimly. "In my experience, legitimate family financial planning doesn't require research into mental competency evaluations." The room fell silent except for Mark's labored breathing. He looked at me with something approaching recognition, seeing for the first time the businessman who'd built the wealth they'd tried to steal. "What happens now?" Mark whispered, looking at me with something approaching recognition. perhaps seeing, for the first time, the businessman who had built the wealth they'd tried to steal. I stood, feeling every year of my age, but also every ounce of my accumulated wisdom and experience. Now we discuss consequences. I retrieved the legal documents I'd prepared over the weekend from my desk drawer. I'm changing my will immediately. My estate will go into an educational trust for Lily, accessible when she turns 21. Mark leaned forward desperately. Dad, please! We made mistakes, but we can fix this. The trust will provide for her college education, graduate school if she chooses, and startup funds for whatever career path she selects. I spread the new will documents across my desk. Jennifer, I need these witnessed and notarized. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. Dan, you can't do this to your own family. I'm protecting my family, I replied firmly, from parents who were willing to steal their granddaughter's independence to fund their lifestyle. Jennifer examined the documents professionally. Mr. Miller, these terms are quite specific. There are conditions attached. If Mark and Sarah formally renounce all claims to my estate and demonstrate genuine change over the next year, I'll reconsider, I explained. But they must prove they've become the parents Lily deserves. Robert nodded approvingly as he witnessed my signature. The educational trust structure is excellent. She'll have every opportunity you never got to provide directly. Mark buried his face in his hands. What does genuine change mean? How do we prove that? By getting jobs that actually support your family instead of depending on me, I said, my voice hardening. By prioritizing Lily's happiness over your own financial desires. By showing me that my granddaughter matters more to you than my bank account. Sarah stood abruptly, her composure finally cracking completely. How are we supposed to live without your support? The same way millions of other families do, I replied. Through honest work and responsible spending. The mortgage assistance ends today. The car payments stop immediately. You're both adults with college degrees. Figure it out. Jennifer finished notarizing the documents with practiced efficiency. Everything is legally binding now, Mr. Miller. You should keep these in a secure location. My attorney will have copies by this afternoon, I assured her. After Jennifer and Robert departed with handshakes and promises of discretion, the three of us sat in uncomfortable silence. Mark looked broken. Sarah appeared to be calculating survival strategies. Is there anything else you want to say? I asked. Mark met my eyes for the first time since the revelation began. I'm sorry, Dad. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm genuinely sorry. Sarah said nothing, which told me everything about her priorities. Words are cheap, Mark, I said. Actions over the next year will determine whether this family has a future together. 3 hours later, Lily knocked on my door, her school backpack still slung over her shoulder. Grandpa, she said softly, Mommy said you wanted to see me? I knelt to her eye level, just as I had in the hallway 2 days ago. Come sit with me, sweetheart. We need to talk about some grown-up things. She settled beside me on the couch, her 8-year-old wisdom already sensing something serious. Is this about what I told you? Partly, I said. Your mommy and daddy made some bad choices about money, and there have to be consequences. But none of this changes how much I love you. Are they in trouble? She asked. They have to learn to take better care of themselves and you, I explained gently. But Lily, I want you to know that your future is completely safe. I've made special arrangements to make sure you can go to any college you want, study anything that interests you. Her eyes brightened slightly. Even veterinary school? That's really expensive. Especially veterinary school, I smiled. And if you change your mind and want to be an engineer or a teacher or start your own business, there will be money for that too. What about Mommy and Daddy? They're going to work very hard to become better parents, I told her. And if they succeed, our family might be able to heal from this hurt. But even if they don't, you and I will always have each other. She hugged me tightly, and in that embrace, I felt Diane's presence. 3 generations of love continuing despite betrayal and broken trust. Can we look at college brochures? Lily asked. I want to see what veterinary schools look like. Absolutely, I said, reaching for my laptop. We have all the time in the world to plan your future. Outside, spring was turning to summer, and Diane's roses were finally beginning to bloom.